Recently, we got to play 2 hours worth of Red Dead Redemption 2, which was very exciting.
Yeah.
And we're going to tell you a little bit about what we saw. Now, that demo was broken down into 3 main parts, the first of which was based up in the Grizzly Mountains. So the first mission we saw is called Who the Hell is Leviticus Cornwall?
Yes.
And we'll talk about that in a second. But it's a mission that's set early on in the game, and at that point, Dutch and the gang are all up in the Grizzly Mountains.
Yes, and it seems to be, well, they called it Chapter 1. I'm assuming it's going to be called Chapter 1 in the game as well. And from what we understand, the Grizzlies are essentially GTA 5's North Yankton.
Yeah.
A sort of separate, well, in this case not separate, but an enclosed area that you can't leave for the start of the game while it tutorializes you, introduces you to everyone. Dutch's gang is huge, like 20-something people.
Yeah.
So it's really going to sort of spend some time getting you used to all these people and how they all interact. So you start off, it's a very snowy, cold place. There seems to be some unrest. Then Dutch presents them with the mission that you go on to play.
Yes, and it's at this point where the weather is beginning to clear. They're planning to go down into the prairies a bit later on, but first there's one last mission to try and get a load of cash.
Yeah.
And that is robbing a train from Leviticus Cornwall.
Who's sort of a local magnate in everything.
Yeah.
Like, he seems to be oil money, like he's a kind of early, I don't know, entrepreneur. He's probably a metaphor for something.
Maybe.
He's one of those things.
But we spotted him, and well, he's certainly his thugs and all the property that he owns a few times as we played the demo.
Yeah, you'll pass big barn buildings with Cornwall written across the side. So he seems to be, I think he might be the antagonist. Well, that's the impression I'm getting.
Yeah. But at this point, 6 of the riders from the gang, they head off and they go to do this train robbery. Now, we don't want to go into too much detail because we don't want to spoil it, but they're a bunch of outlaws that are perhaps not at the peak of their game, so it doesn't all go quite to plan. They do get on the train, and what you see is your first kind of taste of the gunplay, which I think feels substantially better compared to the original Red Dead.
I think it feels better compared to GTA as well.
Yeah.
Like, there's a real sort of meatiness. Like, when they first started firing the pistol, this was a sort of hands-off section as someone introduced us to the game.
Yeah.
The first thing I said was, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Like, the pistol just sounds brutal, like a real thump to it. And that's the same across all the weapons. We didn't actually get to use much beyond the sort of core inventory, but we were told things like shotguns blow people's arms off and stuff now. Like, there's a real focus on those guns feeling good, presumably because you get to fire so many fewer bullets than you would in GTA with a fully automatic gun.
Yeah.
So that's great. And then Deadeye's back, almost seemingly almost unchanged. Like, it slows down time, you can still paint targets. That's kind of it. There seems to be an improvement for hunting, where you can upgrade it later on, but in terms of this early mission, it's as you remember it.
Exactly. So you eventually make your way to the end of the train robbery, again, avoiding spoilers, and you're left, I guess, Arthur is left with a decision, which I guess plays into the honor system of the game. Like, do you make a good decision or do you make a bad one? And apparently that's going to have a big impact on how people treat you over the course of Red Dead. Obviously, we didn't see too much of that during our 2 hours, but it gave a hint as to kind of some of the big decisions that you are going to have to make along the way. Yeah,
it looks like Arthur's going to be a character you actually make real choices for and change his trajectory. I don't know how much that means in terms of the storyline, but Arthur himself seems to be quite malleable. You can make him a sort of saintly outlaw.
Yeah.
Or he can be a real bastard.
Yeah.
That's quite exciting to me because John Marston didn't feel that, malleable. John Marston was John Marston.
Yeah.
And that's why people loved him. But I think Arthur's going to be a bit more of us.
The second part of the demo we saw was a lot more kind of open and free play, and you played this primarily.
Yeah.
And it was us just, having fun in the open world.
Yeah, they sort of dropped us into this area very pointedly staring at the Grizzlies, which were miles away.
Yeah.
So the implication being, at some point between Chapter 1, which we played before, and this was Chapter 2, we don't know how far into Chapter 2, but we were in there. They had travelled this very long distance, and the gang's camp had moved as well. And you found yourself in New Hanover, which is a sort of area of prairie land that feels very stereotypical to Westerns.
Yes.
It looks like a lot of places you've seen in Westerns before. And we're promised lots of different biomes, or whatever we call them nowadays. But this was, as you remember Red Dead being. Essentially, they just left us to do whatever we wanted. So the first thing I did was tell someone I was going to rob them, shoot them, and then get a shot myself. It's brilliant.
Followed quickly by marshals turning up, then bounty hunters, lots of running and chasing, and a big screen saying dead.
Yeah, but there's the best way to describe just playing around in the open world in Red Dead, for me, is that all these systems turn like cogs on each other, and you just constantly find yourself in these loops of interesting things happening. Yeah. So the new dialogue system is, without doubt, my favourite addition to Red Dead 2. You can walk up to anyone, if your gun's holstered, hold L2, it targets them, and then you get a contextual menu of, you can press rob, you can press greet, you can press antagonize, call out if you're on a horse travelling past them, and it gives you these contextual conversations, really funny little, just nuggets of discussion with people that all seem to flow naturally into one another, which is just amazing in and of itself.
And it's all very different as well, because like in one instance, like Arthur's literally telling this guy that his mum hates him and stuff like that. And then there's another bit where he's talking about how respect is the one thing that we've got on this world, and then he goes back and says, well, you haven't got any. And you can choose to kind of diffuse that situation or escalate it. And then there was occasion where you chose to kind of try and defuse it, but at that point the guy was too far gone. Pulled out his gun, started firing at you.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what I'm talking about. Those cogs. It's like you'll be in a conversation, you push it too far, like just to see what happens. It turns into a gunfight. Then you're playing the gunplay. You've killed someone. Then the lawmen come, and you're having to make decisions about, do I surrender to them and go to jail? In which case, we're told, we didn't see, that if you're in jail, there's a random chance that the gang will come and blow you out, and then it becomes a jail chase, a jailbreak scene. Or you can fight them. You can combine the two, so you can use the dialogue system to put your hands up, and then as they get closer to you with their guard down, pull your gun out and shoot them all. Like, it's just constantly giving you these little choices, and they all cascade into one another, and it's just brilliant to be there. It's just a fun place to be.
It really is. We also saw some of the hunting, which I saw in the demo, which we saw back in March. Very similar thing. You can basically track any of the wildlife that you see around the world. In this case, it was deer. But basically, you get a ghostly trail that follows after the animal that you're tracking. So in this case, we pulled off the bow and we followed the deer. And it was as we saw before, you fire off a shot, you whistle just before you do it, just to kind of give yourself a second to start the animal. It wounds, you run after it, and then you plunge the dagger in its heart.
As this screaming deer looks at you with its horrible dying eyes. It makes you feel really bad, the hunting.
I know. But what I saw before was that Arthur picked it up and took it back to camp. Whereas this time, we saw you actually skinning it on the spot, starting your own little kind of camp where you could cook and then eating it yourself.
Yeah, and that seems to be a big part of it. Crafting in particular seems to be a big addition. Like recipes, like making different kinds of food. There are some really Zelda-y touches in there, which I'm sure Rockstar wouldn't want people to call it, but it is. That's the biggest touch point for me in a lot of ways. And those recipes will, if you eat too many, Arthur becomes fat, apparently.
Visibly fat.
Which is kind of interesting. It's a bit more San Andreas-y than we're used to from Rockstar recently. You can bring that food and make certain food for your horse, or you can bring that food back to camp. You can use certain animal parts to craft things, so there's crafting ammo. You can create special small game arrows or fire arrows. There seems to be a lot more integration of things you pick up will become immediately useful to you. And again, choices, that idea of, do I want to keep helping out the gang? Well, if you do, your camp gets better, it becomes a fast travel point, the resources increase if you choose to interact with it, but there's no punishment for not doing that, which I find really interesting. Camp in general is we didn't get to see much of it, but it's a really pleasant place to be. People are constantly talking to you, people are asking favours. There's apparently one thing, which some of our colleagues saw, where Arthur can go and look in a mirror, then use the dialogue system with himself, and he starts talking about himself, which is just amazing.
It's a nice touch.
All these tiny little touches that constantly, just give you that little bit more to play with. It's really nice.
When I was playing, I happened across just a small gathering of people building a house. It was a father and his two sons, and so we wandered up, and the dad was saying how useless his kids are with hammer and nails. And just to kind of illustrate that point, I went over, I'll go and have a chat to the boys. But at that point, they screamed and ran away. And then the house fell down on me and killed them instantly. And it was just like completely unexpected. But very, very funny. And obviously I'm assuming that the entire game map is going to be filled with that kind of stuff. Just little things for you to discover and have fun with. And apparently when you come back later in the game, the house is more built. Even though it fell down when I was there.
I suppose the first game was all about, the West dying. This seems to be the West getting up to the point where it begins dying. So you're seeing it develop out of being the Old West.
Yeah.
And that's how it's going to signify that. As you play more of the story, the world itself ages with you, which seems like a really interesting idea.
So the last mission we saw was called Paying a Social Call, and we've just found an informant from a rival gang. I say found, he's tied to a tree.
Also, he's an informant in as much as there's a very kind of heavily implied torture scene that's going to happen, and then he informs. It's not like he's come to you on his own and been like, yeah, I've got this info.
Exactly. But we are basically finding the location of a rival gang. So Bill and a bunch of the other guys, they ride out looking for this other gang with the informant, and very quickly come to a clearing where they will group the other gang members. But first there's a patrol on the outskirts.
This is very much them telling you, here's some stealth, try out the stealth mission. And watching you play, I saw that go catastrophically wrong almost immediately.
We could have played the other option because you can choose to order somebody to go and do it for you.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I can definitely handle this.
You just bought a new gold knife, so you really wanted to use your gold knife.
And I crept up close, and I went for the kill, and I pressed the wrong button. So he turned around, halfway going through to the toilet, and next thing you know, all hell is breaking loose. But at least it gave us a good idea of what the cover system is like, and I think it demonstrates that obviously Arthur and the gang, they are very vulnerable, and if you don't use cover and the health tonics that you can craft, you're going to be dead very, very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it doesn't want you to be playing recklessly. It wants you to feel like, I mean, kind of obviously, Old West gunfights are a lot of people hiding behind things, taking pot shots. It's always that way. And occasionally you'll do something amazing with Deadeye, but most of the time you'll just be shot in the face. So that stealth is not only built in as an idea, it seems to be you should be trying to use this before you get into those gunfights to thin the herd. Another really interesting thing about that sequence was how well the AI was trying to move around you. Like, you had a lot of guys appearing from the side of you, and they weren't materializing there. I was watching them move up whilst you were going one way, and then you're like, oh, they're on the right, and you really get a sense of this gang is working as a gang. They're trying to work against you at the same time.
And the other thing that I noticed was they take a hell of a lot of bullets if you don't aim for the right part of their body. If you hit them in the arm or the chest, they might go down, but they will get back up again. Headshots make a massive difference.
And it wants you to be trying to get better. And there seems to be some element of incentivizing playing well. Like, we didn't see much beyond what happens with stamina, which is if you run more, you get more stamina. But there do seem to be a set of base level stats that are shown in the menus only that do improve, but we're not sure how. And I wouldn't put it past them for that to be accurate shooting, surviving more in gunfights, not having to use health tonics and that kind of thing. But that's something we're going to have to find out. And that's very much where they left us with the story mission. It was a cliffhanger. We don't know where it's going from here. And they really want us to be doing exactly this kind of thing where we're like, we've played all this stuff, we don't know where it's going, it feels amazing. And that is true. It is just, it's already an astonishing game. Of course, single player is only one half of Red Dead 2. There's also Red Dead Online, and we had an exclusive Q&A with the developers, and you can check out what we found out from that right now.